WTBQ. Ain't I got you on the back foot? And you know I got you really good.
Good morning, everybody, and happy Saturday. I'm Katie Krahulik, and you're listening to Leading Ladies, a women's talk show that features relatable, intelligent, compassionate, powerful, productive women of the 21st century. Erin Shanahan is here co-hosting with me today.
Good morning, everyone.
And our first guest is also here at the station, ready to go. I'd like to welcome Jonnie Wesley-Krueger to our show. Thank you so much for coming in today, Jonnie.
Well, thank you, ladies, for having me.
No problem. It's our pleasure. So first, we're just going to start off with, can you give a little summary synopsis of what it is you do or you've been doing recently?
Okay. Well, I have spent my career in health and human services, and interestingly enough, because I started off in rape crisis stuff, my work has morphed into more hospital and healthcare based. And I have worked at what was Orange Regional Medical Center for about 18 years. I actually succeeded my mother in their director of education role, and
Wow.
But in the course of my time with them, in addition to being the director of education, I was the hospital spokesperson and the director of media relations. I was the director of government relations and grants development, and throughout much of that 18 years, I was also the liaison to the sexual assault nurse examiner program.
Right.
So it was kind of like all of those things going at the same time.
Right.
When I left Orange Regional Medical Center, I went to work for a family health center, which is one of those critical health service providers that provides health-related services to individuals and families that may not have insurance or may not have access otherwise. And it was an honor and a privilege to work there. And now I'm about to join the Bon Secours system.
Okay, nice.
Under the auspices of the Westchester Health Network, but I'm going to be working at St. Anthony's here in Warwick, and Good Sam in Suffern, and the Bon Secours Hospital in Port Jervis as something called their engagement officer. And while that title might imply that I'm going to be scheduling marriages or something, the real focus is on helping to ensure that the staff is fully engaged in delivering an exceptional patient experience.
Right. Wow, that's awesome. Did you see yourself kind of going down the health route? How did you, decide to?
You know what I can say as a woman and as a professional is the whole notion of working in health and human services has always appealed to me.
Okay.
Interestingly enough, I come from a family where my dad was a doctor and he was an OBGYN by coincidence. But he went on to be an administrator, and my mother was a nurse. And as mentioned, she went on to be the director of training and education at the local hospital. The idea of being a part of health and human services has always appealed to me because the bottom line notion is being in a field where you absolutely get to have an impact and make a difference on people's lives. And especially at some of the most vulnerable times. You know, in healthcare and in a hospital-based setting, you're talking about people that have gotten to a place where, with the exception of delivering a baby, everybody else is coming in because something is wrong, something is injured, something is broken, something isn't working well, something is making them sick. And so you're encountering people at some of the most vulnerable times.
Right.
And to be in a situation where you can enhance that experience and make that better so that they not only have their medical and clinical needs taken care of, but their emotional needs as well, that has always appealed to me.
All important, absolutely. Yeah. So, like you said, you deal with some, more neglected and disadvantaged people. And I'm, as this is a women's talk show, I'm curious as to that side of your job, So can you talk a little bit about, the women that you come into contact with in these fields, whether it's your patients, we'll start with patients and victims, and then even just your coworkers, and a little bit about the experience you get from your angle.
Well, one of the interesting things, and I'll share an early story about stepping into a hospital. I mean, in the course of my career, and again, having mentioned, I started off in a rape crisis center, but in ending up in a hospital for the first time, one of the things that was always fascinating to me is that this is a career path that's dominated by women.
Right.
I mean, when you think of healthcare in the traditional sense in particular, and you step into a hospital setting, the numbers are such that, minimally you're talking about 70% of the employees in a hospital setting are going to be women.
Right. And that's what some of the past, guests on our show have been telling us.
Mm-hmm. And it's fascinating because when I first joined what was Horton Medical Center at the time, which was in the end of 95, beginning of 96, it was such a departure for me from the health and human services agencies that I had worked for prior, because it was about almost a step back in time. The leaders of the organization, with the exception of the vice president of nursing, were all men.
Right.
The predominant lead providers were all doctors, which were predominantly men, and almost everybody else working in the hospital, with the exception of the engineering department and some of the food service workers, some of the housekeeper or environmental services workers, were all women.
Yeah.
And the power imbalance and the leadership structure was
Right.
just, it was just like, where am I? Because there was even references. I mean, and sometimes there were comments made about the women, and my jaw would hang open. I would have to go talk to my vice president, who is a man, and say, I'm sorry, I do feel like I've stepped back in time. Where am I?
Right.
What is this place where,
Right.
you know, the women are referred to as girls and the men are in charge,
Right.
and everybody takes instructions from the men, and I'm stunned. The proportion at that time was probably 82% female in this one hospital, and yet it was the men that were in the predominant leadership role. So
Right.
in the course of my career, that has shifted, but again, not to any equitable place.
Right.
Right. Definitely. So you've been mentioning, you know, your route, your start with rape crisis, working with rape crisis, and you did a helpline. So can you talk about those a little bit, whichever one you'd like to address first? But
Well, you know, what I can say is, if somebody had said to me when I was a student at UC Irvine, University of California, Irvine, that, you know, you're gonna be a rape crisis professional and you're gonna go on to doing everything else that you've done, I would have said, what?
oh, really?
Yes, because I was, my undergraduate degree was in humanities and linguistics and language and
Okay.
communication and everything. So it was not a career path that was readily available. But I became involved on campus with the Women's Studies program and with the Women's Resource Center and with the Rape Prevention program,
Yes.
which was, and ladies, this is, I'm sure, an time of great history and antiquity for you, but I started college in 1979 and was there in the first couple of years in the 80s. And at that time, that was only within 10, 12 years of the formal women's movement. And so a lot of this stuff was groundbreaking. I mean, first, to have a rape prevention education program was really kind of a big deal.
Yeah.
And so I had the great experience of all of these women as mentors kind of guiding me, leading me, teaching me, and helping me to identify things that I felt very passionately about. So my first job out of college was in a rape program that included a rape hotline and a rape advocacy program. When I got married and my husband and I moved back to New York, I went to work for something called the Mental Health Association, where I was doing more broad-based hotline work and helping people with, more issues. But also I was responsible for the Rape Crisis Services program there as well. And first and foremost, a hotline, I think, is a very, very, very helpful service because it enables people that otherwise might not have the means or might not have the courage to physically come forward and present at in an agency or at an organization,
Right.
but that they can pick up the phone and feel some promise of anonymity and be able
Right.
to reach out and say, this is what's going on and I don't know what to do about this.
Absolutely.
Did you work for MHA Orange County?
Yes.
That's where I do the helpline there right now.
Oh,
I'm
for
a
goodness
call
sakes.
taker. Yeah.
Okay.
It's such a powerful thing.
Yes.
And you're so right. There's so many people. Most of the people who call in are people of like lesser means and they can't afford to get the mental health that they need.
Right.
And it's such a great program. I'm so glad I do it too.
Yeah, no, and it's for volunteers in particular, it's a wonderful way to reach out and be helpful because again, you are, well, first of all, from a comfort and a convenience point of view, as you know, you can work the hotline in the office or you can have calls be routed to your home. So that part works really nicely. And it's such an important way to be able to give back because folks, when they finally pick up a phone, are generally in some state of urgency because either the situation has gotten to a place where it's just feeling like it's out of control,
Right.
or they've gotten to a place where they're feeling bordering on helpless and hopeless. And so to have somebody on the other end who has resource and information and training and compassion is an extraordinary gift. And regardless of what the issue is that's causing them to reach out, having that person on the other end of the phone makes such a huge difference when they get off the phone and the degree to which they can feel assisted.
Definitely. So we're going to continue this conversation right after this short break. I'm here with Jonnie Wesley-Krueger. We're talking about her story and impact on the community. I'm Katie Krahulik. This is Erin Shanahan with me as well. And you're listening to Leading Ladies right here on WTBQ Radio.
Mountain Creek Resort, located in Vernon, New Jersey, the most unique wedding and event destination resort in the country. Say I do on a spectacular mountaintop with stunning views, followed by your fantasy reception of up to 260 people and guest accommodations. Mountain Creek Resort, known for impeccable service and delectable cuisine. Whatever the size of your wedding or special event, it'll feel intimate and unique. An event specialist will create a truly magical experience with a special twist in a one-of-a-kind venue, the rustic, elegant ambiance of the Red Tail Lodge. Mountain Creek's your #1 destination for skiing, snow tubing, swimming, biking, or simply enjoying the water park. You and your guests will share memorable moments that'll bring you back time and time again. Mountain Creek in Vernon, New Jersey, making your dreams a reality in all 4 seasons. So call now 973-827-2000 or visit mountaincreek.com.
Hi, this is Dr. Calvin Hargis. Traumatic brain injury, or TBI, results from severe head trauma damaging the brain and its neural connections. Depression, memory loss, anger, aggression, and inappropriate behavior are the hallmarks of TBI. This was Mike's situation when we began his neurofeedback therapy. His brain injury had occurred 2 years prior, and his doctor said his total absence of short-term memory would never improve. When we started neurofeedback, Mike could watch the same movie 1,000 times and never get bored. Now, after 8 months of neurofeedback therapy, he can remember conversations he had days ago and take public transit into the city on his own. Neurofeedback therapy has given Michael a richer life. If you or a loved one suffers with traumatic brain injury, call Warwick Brain and Spine Therapy at 845-986-5500 to arrange for your private consultation.
Where your heart beats for the fun of it, YMCA.
Need a safe, fun, and stimulating program for your school-age child before and after school hours. The YMCA of Middletown provides quality, affordable child care programs in 22 schools throughout Orange County. Professionally trained, caring adult role models are there when you can't be. Register now for fall programs, as most locations fill quickly. Contact the YMCA at 845-344-9622 or visit our website at middletownymca.org to learn about all of our sites. And as always, our Strong Kids campaign provides financial assistance to those who qualify.
Hi, this is Peter Feller of A&T Healthcare, your one call for the finest in home healthcare. Tune in every Thursday at 10 a.m. to hear the latest news on everything health-related, because your health does matter right here on WTBQ Radio, worth listening to.
Hi, it's Tom Fersi. Join me for the music and memories of the 1980s on The Magic of the 80s, Saturday afternoons at 2 on WTBQ and WTBQ.com.
Magic of the 80s. WTBQ. Ain't I got you on the back foot, and you know I got you really good.
We are back. Hello and welcome to those who just tuned in. I'm Katie Krahulik, and I'm here with Erin Shanahan, my co-host. And you're listening to Leading Ladies, a women's talk show that features relatable, intelligent, compassionate, powerful, productive women of the 21st century. We are here today in the studio with Ms. Jonnie Wesley-Krueger, and we were just talking about her involvement with Helpline and Rape Crisis, and she was explaining her role a little bit. And now my question for Jonnie is, I'm curious as to, the statistics when it comes to different demographics with the people that you run into in these scenarios. And so, what is the majority, and what is the percent of people that are women and females who come, and maybe call in, or that you've dealt with in Rape Crisis?
Well, one of the interesting things is the numbers. The numbers are pretty stereotypical. I mean, the majority of sexual assault victims tend to be females. When we're talking about adult age in particular, when we start talking about 18 and above, one of the things that's always been very stunning to people, though, is to know that the number of male victims of sexual assault has increased over time. The question has always been whether it actually has physically increased, or is it just because men, like women, are becoming more likely to come forward and tell the story.
Right.
But bottom line is that when we talk about women in sexual assault, we talk about the majority of cases are your age group. I mean, between the ages of 18 and like 24 years of age. And that's, of course, because of college and dating and all of that exposure kind of stuff. The other thing that's really disconcerting is that the overwhelming majority of rape cases involve acquaintances. So whereas in the past, or maybe what we want to believe, is that a rapist is likely to be that stranger out on the street, the reality is something more disconcerting, and that is that, no, it's likely to be somebody that you know in some capacity who is more likely to literally betray that trust that you may have in that person and take advantage. So in that regard, the really scary part about it is you could be with almost anyone at any time and not know.
Right.
Is this situation going to end up badly, and is this person going to end up wanting to do something to me? Certainly one of the things that we can talk about is the recent case with the student from Stanford University, the swimmer, who, has just been convicted. The jury found him guilty, but that the big controversy that has come out is that in the sentencing, the judge, instead of imposing the recommendation of the district attorney and the prosecutor in the case of 6 years in state prison, has opted to give this young man 90 days in county jail.
It's ridiculous.
The nature of the crime of what was committed is that he had a young woman with him who unfortunately had too much to drink and became unconscious, is my understanding, and that he raped her behind a dumpster.
Right.
And the fact that the judge found the sense of compassion for the sex offender in this case is stunning.
Absolutely.
Because I think if the judge were to be thinking in terms of, if this was your daughter, would you really feel the need to feel this tremendous empathy for this young man who was such a stellar student and athlete? And what's interesting to note is, besides the sentencing has drawn the huge outrage on a national level and through all the means of social media, two of the women who actually wrote letters on behalf of this young man because they had relationships with him, one was his guidance counselor and one was a classmate and a friend, are now recanting those letters and apologizing to the victim because they feel,
as they should.
Yeah, they feel like they've made a huge mistake in what they've done.
Is this news and this, recent scenario something that impacts you more because of your experience and the things that you've seen? How did you feel when you heard about this? What was going through your mind?
The really disappointing thing is there's that part of me that wants to feel like this stuff has gotten significantly better in the years. And there's ways in which it has. I mean, there are absolutely ways in which, first of all, the fact that we're talking about this is not hugely different because, as you and I have spoken about, this was something that I did in college as well. But the other
Jonnie hosted a radio show as well when she was in college, and that's what she's saying. And it was a women's show as well.
Yes, called Born Female.
Yes.
So I love leading ladies. You guys are the leading ladies, and I was talking about Born Female. So in that regard, it's very encouraging that we're staying the course. But the flip side is, and the fact that there's been this tremendous outcry on social media, and that there's been this call for the judge's removal from the bench, and this outrage over all of the support for the rapist and everything else, that I guess I should feel encouraged about. The fact that it's still happening and it's happening in this way is really disappointing, because I would like to think that in the course of the years since I've been doing this work, that things had, magically gotten better.
Yeah, I'm looking at the petition online right now, and it looks like it's up to 1,100,000 supporters. It's really crazy. It has been such a viral thing that's happened, and I think it's really raised a lot of awareness. But
definitely,
something we were talking about earlier too is that it's a good thing that it's getting all this publicity, but we don't want it to deter people from coming out about these sort of incidents either. So that's an interesting
and
thing.
that's the hard part, because still in all, I mean, the questions have always been, well, what was she doing? Well, what was she doing? Well, why was she so intoxicated? Or, less so today, but still to a certain extent. We hear the focus on when there is a rape that happens, especially between acquaintances. Interestingly enough, from a cultural point of view, people still focus more on the victim and want to know what was she wearing, how was she behaving, had she led him on in some way, why was she alone with him, and again, why was she drinking to the place of being this kind of intoxicated? My question has always been, she's on the receiving end. Why are we asking those questions of the victim? And why is the focus not, what was he thinking? Was this contrived from the beginning? At what point did he decide he was going to do this? No one compelled him to do this. I've always joked, and as the mother of twin sons, I've always said that, yes, we'd like to believe that, men's sexual organs have a brain of their own, but the reality is that it does not. So at what point does that take over and the brain disconnects? So, to that end, it's disappointing that in 2016, there is still some of that excuse making going on for the perpetrators of these crimes, as opposed to the outrage that should follow.
Definitely. And we actually have a caller, so we're going to put them in. Hello, can you please give us your name and tell us where you're from? We had a caller. Are you there? Hello?
I guess not.
Okay, that's all right. Anyway, continuing the conversation. So on that note, you were a liaison for a program called SANE. And can you talk about, the work you did there?
Sure.
And exactly what that is?
And that was another step of progress. And the program is called SANE, Sexual Assault Nurse Examiner, although there's another acronym which is called SAFE, which is Sexual Assault Forensic Examiner. And that's because it doesn't necessarily just have to be a nurse that might be doing it. But basically, this was a huge enhancement. When rape victims would find the courage to come forward and go to a hospital emergency room, there is a whole evidence collection kit that has to be done. So besides the medical treatment that they need to receive, there's also the business of the collection of evidence. Well, the average emergency room doc, unless they've received some special training, don't necessarily know how to do that. I was present with victims where the doctor would turn to the nurse and say in front of the victim, have you ever done one of these before? You're going to have to read me the instructions because I'm not sure how to do it. Wow. The SANE program then was basically a recognition that that was not producing evidence of any really useful quality. And so how do we identify a group of medical professionals who could be specifically trained and therefore be on call? So the Sexual Assault Nurse Examiner program was the creation of, through the state, the creation of trained professional nurses who would be on call so that if a rape case presented to the emergency department and the victim wanted to report, that the SANE nurse would be called in. So now we're talking about somebody with specific and extensive training on how to collect the physical evidence and how to testify in a courtroom situation so that now we can actually present what has been present the information gathered in a way that can be useful.
That's fantastic. So given, all of these different factors and everything that we've been talking about and everything that you've come to see, I want to talk about rape culture a little bit. And is that something that you see being true in the United States, in our culture? Is that something that you think is prevalent?
Well, again, you can point to progress. And when you consider the role of women and the fact that we now actually have a woman presidential candidate in your lifetime, regardless of people's political views, the reality that we have a woman political candidate,
it's a feat,
is a huge statement about a shift. In my lifetime, at your age, that was inconceivable. Wanted, Geraldine Ferrara came on the scene, and there was hope that it might happen someday. But to have it at this point in time in your lifetime, it really is about destroying the last remaining barriers in that way. But in general, from a rape culture point of view, you consider that the culture starts with everything beginning from what are our expectations from men and women.
Right.
And when you understand that still in 2016, the definitions and the expectations of men and women are to behave masculine, which means strong, in charge, and dominant.
Yes.
And women should still be feminine, which means literally more on the lines of weak and delicate and more submissive.
Right.
we have seen women, and women more than men, break through that barrier, and women redefine femininity so that it doesn't necessarily just mean weak and helpless purely. Right. Men have not had the same success with redefining masculine to include emotional or vulnerable.
Yes. That's a great point.
But with those expectations, when men take charge and dominate and start dictating what should happen and everything, they're positively reinforced that that's what the expectations are.
Right.
You know, we still don't think highly of men that are not physically competent or men that are not emotionally dominant in some way. Mm-hmm. So the rape culture still exists. It is different in the ways that it were. Would y'all like to talk to me about friends with benefits and tell me what that's all about?
No.
Yeah. I mean, under the circumstances, how have we morphed so that young women, you know, treating their male friends with sexual favors is like a cool thing to do?
How did we get here?
How did we get to that place?
Right.
I remember when my sons first heard about it and were giggling one day at the dinner table. And I'm like, what are we talking about? And they told me. Oh, Mom, do you know what friends with benefits is? Do you know what this means? And fortunately, I had heard about it. And they go, well, it's kind of cool, don't you think? And I literally had to say to my sons, who were probably 13 or 14 at the time, gentlemen, I want you to look down for just a moment. And I want you to imagine your penis was sticking out. Would y'all want to stick that in your mouth? And they both went, ew. And I said, exactly right. So let's consider very carefully, how cool is this that somebody is willing to just do that for you with no, you know, commitment of any other kind.
Right, definitely.
Something to think about. Now, the men in my life have since said, oh, well, that was a great thing to say to them. How long did that get you? And I said, I'm sure that bought a little bit of time that, you know, if they did have any offers that they were probably a little less willing to receive.
Right.
But, you know, again, the whole notion of the degree to which that level of sexual contact has been trivialized to this notion of, well, we're just friends.
Right.
We just do this for each other. Is it mutual? Really mutual? I don't think that it is.
Right. Mm-hmm.
I think it's still about women servicing men. And again, in 2016, it just causes me to scratch my head and go,
yes, definitely.
Really?
Definitely.
Really?
We do have to wrap it up a little bit, so I just want you to give a quick little, you know, glimpse of hope. What advice or hopes do you have for the future? You know, when it comes to women and being empowered and breaking these barriers.
Yeah. Well, again, you know, in the course of your lifetime, to be able to sit where we are at this moment and to have women as recognized figures in government and women as recognized figures in business and everything else is very, very encouraging. Because, you know, with every barrier that's broken down, it creates a normalcy that allows your generation to move forward without question. And that part's very encouraging. What I would say to other young women in your generation is be mindful that it's not just about you, that you are part of a gender of women and a legacy that precedes you that has basically broken these barriers up until now and will continue to look to you to do the same.
Definitely.
So keep marching on, I guess, would be the best thing I would say.
And we shall. Definitely. Thank you so much for coming and speaking with us today. We really appreciate it.
Thank you for having me.
Kudos to you and everything you've done and accomplished and continue to do. And thank you for the work that you do. And good luck in the future.
Thank you.
You are listening to Leading Ladies. This is Katie Krahulik speaking. We're here with Erin Shanahan. And this is WTBQ Radio. We'll see you after the break.
WVT is your trusted communications provider with a triple play of services, including telephone with crystal clear voice and unlimited local and long-distance calling. And it even works when the power goes out. DirecTV with over 285 channels and DVR service in every room. Act now, because with new subscriptions, you get the 2016 NFL Sunday Ticket free. Add blazing fast internet service to complete the package. All this and local technical support, too. For more information, visit WVT at WVTC.com.
Hey, it's John Tesh. When you go to Leo Cadis Ford, you can always count on their staff to listen to your wants and needs and deliver you an automobile, SUV, or truck at the most competitive price. Leo Cadis Ford delivers it all. You'll walk in a customer, but you'll definitely leave a member of the Leo Cadis Ford family. With almost 40 years in one location and 3 generations buying and selling at Leo Cadis Ford, that's how you define success. Your one stop for new and used cars and A1 service. Get the Works package for only $39.95, which includes up to 5 quarts of oil, and they will change your oil, rotate your tires, top off all fluids, and a free car wash. Hello! They will have you in the driver's seat with financing in place and will service your automobile, all at one showroom in Warwick, New York. Leo Cadis Ford, 145 Route 94. What are you waiting for? Call Leo Cadis Ford at 845-986-1131 or visit their website at leocadisford.com. Quality you can trust.
Kyle Larson's fuel cell about to dry up, and Kurt Busch is pressuring him.
The NASCAR Sprint Cup Series is on the Motor Racing Network.
Larson is off the pace. He's coming to pit road.
The Firekeepers Casino 400 at Michigan.
We'll see how it plays out. Now it's Kurt Busch out front.
Sunday at noon on the Motor Racing Network, the voice of NASCAR.
Brought to you every week by Vogel & Moore Insurance and Dawson Motors.
Hi, this is Dr. David Leach, the superintendent of the Warwick Valley Central School District and host of Your Schools. Listen every Monday at 12 noon to learn what's happening in your schools right here on WTBQ, radio worth listening to.
Hi, this is Orange County Executive Steve Newhouse. Join me and my guests every Monday on the Roundtable at 9 a.m. AM 1110, 93.5 FM, WTBQ.
Ain't I got you on the back foot, and you know I got you really good.
Welcome back. This is Katie Krahulik speaking. I'm here with Erin Shanahan, and to those who just tuned in, you're listening to Leading Ladies, a women's talk show that features relatable, intelligent, compassionate, powerful, productive women of the 21st century. Our second guest is on the line, Miss Dr. Amy Baehr. She was my professor at Hofstra University this past semester, and she is currently the associate professor for the philosophy department at Hofstra University. Welcome, Dr. Baehr, and thank you so much for speaking with us today.
Hi, thank you for having me on your show, Katie.
No problem. It's our pleasure. So we're just going to start with having you talk a little bit about yourself and what it is you do and kind of what sparked your interest in philosophy.
Okay. So I was born in New Jersey, but was raised largely in Stamford, Connecticut, not too far from where you are right now. I studied at Dickinson College. That's where I got my undergraduate degree. And then I got my graduate degree in philosophy at the State University of New York at Stony Brook, which is on Long Island. And I also studied for a couple of years at German universities, first in Munich and then in Frankfurt, both times studying philosophy. And I've been teaching at Hofstra for the past 13 years. I teach philosophy, focusing mainly on political philosophy and philosophy of law, and I teach women's studies courses, the Introduction to Women's Studies course that you're familiar with.
Yes.
And also an upper-level course on feminist philosophy. And I also teach in the criminology program at Hofstra. I teach a course called Crime and Punishment and another course called Philosophy of Law. And I live in New York City with my husband and my 2 children who are 11 and 13.
Nice.
So would you like me to say something about what sparked my interest in philosophy and gender studies?
Yes, if you could, please.
Sure. So when I think back, I think it's not possible for me to have done anything else.
Okay.
I don't know if other people have that experience when they're in midlife, that they look back and think, wow, all these steps made such sense.
Right.
I am kind of, where I was supposed to be in some sense. But my dad majored in philosophy. Well, he went to Haverford College in the late 50s, early 60s. He majored in philosophy. He was, he's still with us, thank goodness. He is what I would call a seeker. A spiritual seeker, always in search of insight about the ultimate nature of reality. When I was a small child, he was a Unitarian Universalist minister, and he then ultimately shifted over to doing psychotherapy. So he was a psychotherapist, still is, in private practice. And the psychotherapy that he did was always and always continues to be kind of grounded in an appreciation human yearning for insight about the world, about who we should be, about how we should live, about what the ultimate nature of reality is. And so, I grew up with this father, at my side, and he was my constant interlocutor. So, my sister didn't end up a philosopher, but I don't see how, growing up talking to my dad, I could have avoided being a philosopher. But then, I don't know how much autobiography you're interested in, but I could say a little something about some other really important influences.
Definitely.
So my father's parents were they were both raised Mennonites in the Midwest. Okay. And the Mennonites, there are a variety of different Mennonites, but in general, Mennonites are a pretty conservative Christian sect that recommends that people think of themselves as in the world but not of it.
Okay.
And so, in many ways, my grandparents were raised very, very conservatively because it was a very Christian, kind of almost fundamentalist, religious kind of environment. But on the other hand, the Mennonites are very liberal. In other ways, they're very, very liberal. So they preach what's called the social gospel. And here the idea is that one should live like Jesus did and do what Jesus did. And on their view, it's that Jesus was a friend and a compatriot to the homeless and the poor. That Jesus was compassionate towards the prostitute and the downtrodden and so on. So I got a very, very strong dose of this when I was a child.
Okay, interesting.
Like that the world is in some sense a corrupt place, and that what the moral person does is stands apart from the world and judges it, and then tries to figure out how to change the world from its current corrupt state to a more ideal situation, right, where people live together under conditions of equality and equal respect and so on. So for me, it was a short step from that message to the interest in feminism.
Right.
And I just want to add then that my father's mother was a poet. She taught for many years in the Garden City public schools as a fifth grade teacher, but her real passion was poetry, and she had also an interest in feminist theology.
Okay.
So she was an incredible role model for me, this woman who was so interested in the way in which our understanding of God is influenced by male dominance in our culture. So, for her, growing up in a very conservative Christian community, she understood God to be male. And that was, for her, a great tragedy. Right. It meant that she was alienated from God, that God was dominating her, right? That God gave no space for her in her individuality. So she spent her whole life trying to imagine a God that isn't a patriarchal God, but a God that is feminine and affirming of women and so on. So these influences were just very, very formative for me. So I kind of can't imagine having not become a philosopher.
Just all different pieces that add up to one big puzzle. But it's funny you mention, having such strong role models, because that's exactly what we're trying to accomplish here on this show with Leading Ladies. And that's why you're here and you're speaking. You're a role model to me. You have been in my class and for everyone listening. So thank you. On the topic of everything you had just been talking about when it comes to your exposure to that liberal mindset and to philosophy and to feminism, can you talk about you've written and published several articles, but one in particular called Liberal Feminism. I just want to talk about that one a little bit. Could you describe its thesis and message and what pushed you to write, this piece?
Sure. So I was asked to write to write this article for the online philosophy encyclopedia. It's a free access encyclopedia of philosophy. And I was asked to write the article on liberal feminism in such a way that it would be relatively accessible to folks just, searching the internet and interested in finding out about this topic.
Right.
So in the article, I really give an overview of a particular feminist school of thought called liberal feminism. I don't defend any unique thesis there, but I rather kind of describe what some of the prominent people in the field have been saying. So, in the media, we often get this message that there's this thing called feminism. It's just this one thing. Just the other day, there was the New York Times had an op-ed piece entitled "Fixing Feminism" or something like that. As if feminism is this one thing. And, it's not. There are a variety of feminist schools of thought.
Of course.
And, liberal feminism is one school of feminist thought, and that's what I focus on in the article. And so the liberal feminism begins with the insight that feminism was born out of liberalism. And when I use the word liberalism, I don't mean left-wing democratic politics.
Right.
Right.
That needs to be
what I mean
clear.
by liberalism is, the classical liberal tradition that begins with John Locke, continues through Jean-Jacques Rousseau, and it was the political philosophy that animated the founders of the United States.
Right.
The idea that what you want to have is a constitutional system that protects the rights and equality of all citizens. And so very early on, as soon as people articulated this liberal idea, right, that justice is a situation in which we all live together under conditions of freedom and equality, as soon as that was articulated in a political moment, say in the French Revolution, feminists were there saying, hey, and what that means is also that women get freedom and that women need to be treated as equals as well. So like in 1789, the French Parliament passes this French Declaration of Human Rights, the rights of man and citizen, and pretty much immediately after that, in 1791, a feminist, Olympe de Gouges, publishes her Declaration of the Rights of Women and the Female Citizen. And soon after the American Revolution, Elizabeth Cady Stanton, along with a number of supporters, she penned, and then a bunch of people signed something called the Declaration of Sentiments. This was 1848 in Seneca Falls, New York, and this was the first kind of feminist declaration in the United States. This is something that Hillary Clinton mentioned just the other night when she clinched the Democratic nomination. So liberal feminism just says that that a just society is one that treats citizens as free equals and also treats women as free equals. Now, you might think, well, that's so obvious, that's so uninteresting. But if you think back through the tradition of liberalism, it's quite clear that the folks who first articulated these values of freedom and equality, they didn't mean for women to be included. And they didn't mean for non-whites to be included either. What actually happened in the French Revolution and the American Revolution was that a bunch of privileged men got together and said, we're going to treat each other as free equals, but we're also going to grant to one another the space and the right to own slaves and the space and the right to more or less own our wives and children.
Yeah, slavery's influence with women is an incredibly interesting topic. I think we should talk about this more after a commercial break. We will be returning shortly, so don't go anywhere. This is Erin Shanahan. I'm here with Katie Krahulik and Professor Amy Baehr. Stay tuned with Leading Ladies here on WTBQ Radio.
This is your wallet talking, and I think we both need to get away. And if we fly Allegiant, we can totally afford it.
Listen to your wallet and visit Allegiant.com. Book a flight nonstop from Stewart International Airport to sunny Tampa, St. Pete, Florida, and Myrtle Beach, South Carolina. Save even more when you book flights, rental cars, hotels, and attractions. At Allegiant.com, prices are so low, you just have to go.
The Epic Times is the newest Orange County newspaper reporting on good news as well as local and national news, and here is what one of their readers had to say.
Bill Warden with the Port Jervis Police Department. We definitely find the paper very helpful. You don't report just the bad news out there, but you actually make a very good attempt to bring out the good in communities.
To receive your 5 free weekly papers, go to epicorange.com or call 845-200-3101.
At Dawson Motors, there's no substitute for quality and customer care. Whether it's the vehicles they sell or the repair and maintenance service they provide, Dawson Motors is Warwick's oldest and largest independent dealership with an honest reputation for customer satisfaction. Their pre-owned vehicles are thoroughly inspected to ensure they meet their high-quality standards of safety and reliability. Their service bays are staffed by ASE-certified technicians trained and equipped to service today's vehicles. For sales and service, they make it easy. Customer-focused salespeople and a state-of-the-art service team dedicated to your complete satisfaction. Dawson Motors, old-fashioned service and modern technology. Stop by or call today at 845-986-8558 or visit them at 45 Oakland Avenue in Warwick, or online at dawsonmotors.com.
Hi, this is Professor Richard Hull, host of the Warwick Historical Society's weekly show, History Alive. Tune in every Monday at 11:05 to learn how history is your past, present, and future. WTBQ, radio worth listening to.
Hi, everybody. This is Jimmy Sturr, inviting you to join me every Sunday morning at 11 o'clock for polka music. We've got 60 minutes of good, exciting polka music on Polka Session. Join us Sunday mornings, 11 o'clock, right here on WTBQ AM or 93.5 FM.
WTBQ. Ain't I got you on the back foot? And you know I got you really good.
We are back. Hello and welcome to those who just tuned in. I'm Katie Krahulik speaking, and this is my co-host, Erin Shanahan. You're listening to Leading Ladies. And on the line, we have Professor Amy Baehr, who works at Hofstra University in the philosophy department. And she had just been talking about an article she had written called Liberal Feminism, which is quite extensive and incredibly, incredibly interesting. And you should definitely check into it. I can post the link to it on my webpage. It's called ladiesleadingshow.wordpress.com, and I'll get that out to whoever wants to see it. We're going to shift gears a little bit with Dr. Baehr, and because Professor Baehr, you had been talking about, your original involvement with philosophy when you were younger, what sparked your interest, and how that started to become tied into gender studies and justice. And so with those three things in mind, philosophy, gender studies, and justice, I'm curious as to how those kind of connect, especially today in modern practice, but also just, in theory. And can you talk a little bit about, why you went down that route and what those have to do with each other?
Sure. So, in my lifetime, it's so recent that many of the really important legal milestones have been reached for women. Certainly women were granted the right to vote before I was born. But equality in education, equality in employment, the right to control our own reproduction, and so on, these legal provisions are really so recent. Many of them reached only in my lifetime. Right. So, for example, traditionally, a woman cannot complain of marital rape. There was no legal protection for women against rape by their husband. So, if there's no legal protection against rape by a husband, that means that a husband has, generally has, sort of for all intents and purposes, has the right to have sex with his wife whenever he wants and even if she doesn't consent. So the protection against marital rape, the legal protection, is exceptionally important. Just like the right to be treated as an equal in education and in employment and so on. So these these are extremely important, but I think there's so much unfinished legal business that needs to be taken care of.
Right.
And then I think there's a lot of unfinished cultural business that has to be taken care of.
Definitely.
So, one of the most important aspects of unfinished business, the unfinished legal business for feminism, is prostitution and sex work. And there's a lot of disagreement among feminists about whether folks who sell sex for a living should be called prostitutes, whether they should be called sex workers. There's disagreement about how the law should approach this issue. And I don't want to take sides on that at the moment, but I do simply want to point out that what we're doing right now with folks who sell sex for a living is an utter failure. It fails those folks who are mostly women. It fails them terribly. Prostitutes are among the most vulnerable citizens that we have. They're the object of derision and stigma, and so that's really some very important unfinished legal business for feminists. We have to figure out how to use the law to improve the lives of people who, for one reason or another, end up selling sex. Another unfinished bit of unfinished legal business is to deal with the pervasive violence against women in our society. And I know your previous interviewees were talking about this. It really is just such a shame how we have to teach our daughters how to protect themselves against unwanted sexual violence and against unwanted sexual attention and against violence. So that's something I think that the law needs to work on. But I think that there's so much work that has to be done in our culture.
Of course.
The law can only do so much. The law can't change hearts and minds.
Right.
Right. So there's such an obsession with objectifying the female body in our culture, and then also stigma around female sexuality, right? That I think makes us less capable of talking clearly about how to protect women from violence, and in particular from sexual violence, right?
Yes, definitely.
So how, that's not something the law can do for us. That's something that has to change in the culture. The same thing with gender roles, how many people feel so limited by the kind of straitjacket of gender roles. And, that's not something that the state can solve for us.
Right.
Yeah, it's very clear in many feminist action agendas that there always seems to be a justice side to it, like you're saying, like talking about the government and their role with women. But there's also this really important social side that can't be forgotten, because
of course
these things won't be accepted in justice unless it's socially accepted as well. It's definitely like two sides of the same coin.
Right, and I think there's that the issue of the gender division of labor in our society is something where both the law and the culture need to change.
Right. Yes.
So our culture still pushes women, doesn't require them legally, but pushes them, culturally speaking, to be the primary caregivers of children and the elderly and the disabled. And that puts women at a disadvantage in the workplace. But it also puts children and the disabled and people who need to be cared for, it puts them at a disadvantage as well. So, a poor woman, for example, a single woman who has no financial resources, she has to choose between working and taking care of her children.
Yeah.
And, that is a feminist issue. We don't want to say that feminism is only for those affluent or professional women who have enough money to pay some other woman to take care of their children.
Right, definitely. And these are all things that you spoke about extensively in your class, and it really gets you thinking, about feminism and reality and culture. And they all really do tie in together, like Erin was saying. You can't have one without the other. unfortunately, we are running out of time here. And I just want to thank you so much, Professor Baehr, for taking the time to speak with us today. And congratulations on all you've accomplished. And just know you're appreciated and respected by so many.
Yes, thank you so much, Professor Baehr.
It's almost...
Well, thank you, Katie. This has really been a treat.
No problem. Thank you for coming.
See you in the fall.
Yes. We are out of time, but tune in again next week. We're doing the same thing. This has been Katie Krahulik and Erin Shanahan, and you've been listening to Leading Ladies on WTBQ Radio.